What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Scratch Agency podcast, hosted by Scratch Agents for Scratch Agents. My name is Stephen Turnbull, founder of T5 Insurance Services, Clinton, New York, and I'm joined by my co-host today, the one and only, you already know, hold your applause, Mr. Sean Fitzgerald, founder of LAF Advisors in Long Island, New York. Mr. Fitzgerald, what's going on today, sir?
Dude, things are going great. I'm excited to have Dave on today because Dave and I go back a couple of years now. I feel like our friendship has grown over the last couple of years, and I look up to Dave. Dave is definitely like a mentor to me, and I always talk about trying to be in a room with people who have been doing it longer than you and who are more successful than you, and who are more established than you. And Dave, you know, you're one of those people. You know, I know you're going to be very humble and, you know, try to play that off, but, you know, I try to hang out with Dave as much as possible. Let's just put it that way. So I'm super stoked to have Dave on the podcast.
Love it. Well, Dave, heard a lot about you. Like I said, all good stuff, of course, and we're super excited to have you. But everybody help me welcome David Borg, who's the agency owner of Borg Insurance Agency. How are you today, sir?
Good. Thank you very much.
Thanks for taking the time to be with us.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, we can hear you. Let's
no, thank you.
Let's start off with just your story. How'd you get into the industry? And then I know Sean wanted to dive into some of the specific stuff we want to talk about, but just introduce yourself, your story in insurance, and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so I am not a scratch agency. I am a family established agency. So my father started the agency in '71. In high school, I asked my dad about insurance, and he gave me a very long, boring, technical answer. And I'm like, that sounds miserable. I'm going to go be a teacher. Went to college, went to be a teacher. I kind of dabbled in the agency over summers and whatnot, kind of just, I had a few other odd jobs here and there. Graduate, teaching, I enjoyed working with kids, but teaching, I don't think really was my full-time, thing. So, I'm like, hey, listen, let me try this a full-time gig. So I approached my dad. He's like, great, you got an interview. So I had to interview with the office manager. I had to do a caliper exam. I had to do everything everybody else does, and came on board. And I started at the front desk. And then from there, I worked on claims, on certificates, personal lines, commercial lines. I was an account executive for about 6-7 years. I tried the accounting. That's not my cup of tea. So they said, Dave, get out of accounting. So, which is totally fine. And I've been growing. I've been here for like 18 years now, something like that.
Nice.
And I have a lot of other family members. So my brother and my cousin are also alongside with me. So they kind of came in around the same time I did. And we really kind of committed to each other that like we're going to grow this agency to our fullest potential, and we all have different strengths. So we kind of leaned into our strengths. So for example, my brother heads up the sales department, so cause that's really where his niche is. I handled more of the service department, and I do a lot of HR stuff. My cousin does personal lines and also HR stuff, as well as tech stuff. So we all kind of really lean into our strengths, and we kind of really just help each other out and kind of pick up where the other's lacking, and we all kind of cross paths, here and there. Like I do some sales, we all will kind of help each other out wherever needed,
How happy is your father that his two sons are in the business?
So it's funny you say that. Listen, financially, I've been better off just selling out, but he has us carrying the torch. And listen, we're not selling out. That's something, again, we've committed to each other. We're not selling out. But it's cool because my father, it's funny, Sean, you mentioned earlier about, surrounding yourself with people who are doing it longer and just, smarter people. I consider my father to be one of those people where he's such a wealth of information. Like, we joke that he's forgotten more about insurance than I'll ever know. So he's just, a wealth of information, has a great reputation in the industry, which, helps out us quite a bit. The fact that, his name is David, I'm David. It's always nice to call an underwriter and say, I'm David Borg, and they usually do a lot more stuff because of my name. Doesn't hurt. So it's also nice to work with my dad as well. So I really enjoy that as well.
That's cool. Dave, can you tell us a little bit about like the size of the agency roughly when you first started 18 years ago and where it is now that it's you, your brother, your cousin, and kind of where you guys have grown it to at this point, and kind of like what the makeup of the agency is?
Sure. Yeah. So the size of the agency, we were about maybe 7, 8 people back in the day. And it was kind of an all hands on deck type of situation where it was kind of like, it wasn't like this is your job. It was, you did anything that you needed to do to get it done. Fast forward to today, we're teetering on 60 employees right now. We have a much more designated management structure. We have, silos with different, niches that we kind of focus in on. So we're a much more organized, well-oiled machine in today's day and age. And our makeup currently is predominantly commercial lines. We're about 75% commercial lines, 25% personal, depending on the report you run.
Did you say 60 people, like 60?
Correct. Yes, we're around 60 people.
So when you started in the agency and then took over, how big was you said, historically you were 7 people?
About 8 people, plus or minus, yeah.
So you were a part of really the transition of growing the team, growing the management out, all of that.
Right. So what happened, obviously, as myself, my brother and cousin came on board. Sorry about that. So, what happens basically is, we were like, we want to grow this. We recognized we were given a great opportunity. We had a great head start. We had carriers, we had appointments, we had a good reputation. So we're like, let's take advantage of this. So we kind of leaned into it, and we just kind of grew very rapidly through organic sales and through acquisitions. We have made a number of acquisitions over the course of time, and we are still continuing to look to make acquisitions. So I mean, we were kind of blessed with this really good opportunity, and we figured let's make the most of it. And the 3 of us have really kind of dug in and really just, that's kind of where we are today. And we have a lot of real estate in front of us. We got a lot of road to cover. So
yeah, the reason I asked that is because you started with, you're not a scratch agent, but I envy your story because I came from a family agency as well before I started Scratch in May of 22. And I was part of the 5th generation at the time at that agency, and 6 or 7 people that answered the phone here, helped Susie with a service request here, sold this policy to Johnny who just walked in and needed an ID card to go to the dealership. Like that was the transition, or the way that the agency operated. And I listen to your story, and it hits me a lot because when I was at the family agency, my time at the family agency was a lot of trying to turn around, update things, processes, procedures. How can we make departments? How can we be? It sounds like a lot of what you have done as your time at the helm there. So I think it's interesting because you talk about the struggles that Scratch people can have, and you also talk about some of the struggles of turning a legacy business around into the new generation. Yep. They're very different, but they're also very similar in some of the ways that the challenges come up and the way you have to overcome those challenges.
Yeah, definitely. I will say I'm very fortunate in the fact that my father tends to be he was very tech savvy. I remember being as a kid, like middle school, going to Babbage, I think it was the name of the old school computer store. So he was always into tech. So I think he did value kind of becoming more streamlined and more efficient. So it wasn't us trying to have to sell him on, hey, we need all these systems and structures in place. He kind of understood that, and he understood that's how you kind of scale. Like it's very difficult to scale, and I see this with a lot of other agencies where you kind of have like the agent, they have a few employees, and they kind of stop growing because they can't kind of get out of their own way, essentially, because they are doing everything and anything. And the problem is when you're doing everything, it's only 24 hours in a day. I mean, unless you want to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you can only get so much done. So that's why you have to leverage, resources, leverage people's time to kind of, allow you to work. We say work on the business, not in the business,
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah. So Dave, what were some of the bigger challenges you had when you guys, because I would imagine that's a big transition, going from 8 people, you're just your father, and then now it's you, your cousin, and your brother. Like, so what were some of the big challenges in the beginning?
Biggest challenge, obviously, the most obvious one is just finding the right staff. There was a point in time we were growing so rapidly, we would just say, hey, breathe on this mirror. Oh, good, you're alive? Fantastic, you're hired. Because we just needed bodies. Then obviously, instead of hiring as a reaction, we tried to start kind of over hiring. So you had that luxury of taking your time to find someone who's the right fit. So you didn't hire when you needed to, you hired when you feel like it was coming. That way you could take your time, really vet and make sure that the person had the right knowledge, the right culture, just, they could blend well with your fit. Because we're trying to create an organization, not only with insurance, but also with culture. Like this is, a lot of people, places just do insurance, but we feel like we're building something a little bit more than just that.
Yeah.
We value the people here. We treat them like family. Very professional. Which takes time to build, obviously. So there's the staffing is a huge component, making sure you have the right technology to kind of back you up. We did change management systems to kind of keep up with our growth. Making sure we had the carriers, making sure we had to support our growth, making sure we had the sales force to also help growth, as well as acquisition. So I mean, these are all things that you kind of have to kind of set the dominoes up, and once you kind of have them, you can almost kind of knock them down, and they kind of do take shape over time. And it's also not a quick process either. I mean, I summed up basically 18 years worth of work in about 3 sentences.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not this like you snap your fingers and Bob's your uncle. You got this. It took time. Yeah.
And Dave, I know the answer to this, but I want to ask you because I think it might be on some people's mind and you and I talked about this. I feel like just from other stories I've heard within the industry, you're like right at that size, usually like where people are just, all right, let me talk to all the top agencies to see who's going to offer me top dollar so I can get out of here and, and cruise around. So why not sell? I'm just curious to hear your story.
I guess, you know what, because of where I came from, I feel like I helped build this, and I'm part of something that's almost kind of bigger than myself, where we have all these people, and I do view these people as my family. And I care about them. I'm also young. I mean, I'm 41, and I have a lot of time ahead of me, I hope, God willing. So, I like the fact that, I get to come up in the morning, I get to come here, I get to say hi to my people. I don't answer to a board. I don't answer to, some sort of private equity firm. It's me and then my partners, and we kind of get to set the terms. And, a lot of cool things also is, I take a lot of advice from the people we hire. So if they have a good idea, we can just take it and run with it. I don't have to go through any, red tape to get that taken care of. It's a fantastic idea. It makes a lot of logical sense. Let's just do it, I think there's a bit of a pride also of the ownership here of just, saying that, I helped build this.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, you're building 60 people. That's awesome. I mean, you're basically building a legacy, and then later on you could decide maybe the kids come into the business, and keep the tradition going.
Yeah, sure. Why not?
It's evident that with the success that you've had of growing from 6 to 7 people, we'll call it, to 60 in that short time frame with that growth, and just the brief conversation we've had already with partners, departments, employees, culture, all of these things that you're saying, it's evident that one thing that's at top of mind, it has to be, is communication. And I think, again, that can relate to the scratch agent that's hiring their first person and taking that one-man shop to a two-man shop. Talk to us about some things that you focus with about communication, whether that be with your partners, whether that be with the new person you're hiring to get them on the bus, and what it looks like to be a part of your team, and some of the things that maybe those who are looking to grow a team can really note down as things to be cautious of, or things to make sure they're doing around that.
Yeah. So one thing I will say, and this is probably the biggest thing I could advise on, is understand how people communicate. I think people they communicate in their style to others, and then when it's not picked up, they get frustrated. I think understanding how people communicate and communicate to them on their level, I think really helps kind of get your message across. So for example, some people like to be, I don't say micromanaged, but some people want to be guided very closely. Some people wanted to be told once and then kind of let them like flounder for a bit. Some people already know what to do. So you kind of have to kind of tailor your communication style of I guess, how are you doing and how often are you doing? Like what's the message? Is it very detailed? Is it very vague? So some people are self-starters. Some people need that structure. So kind of understanding that, and also the method of communication. Some people like phone calls. Some people prefer email. Some people prefer like almost video messages. So for example, so understanding not only how the message itself, but also how the message should be communicated. So if you have that, I'm a big fan of like Teams, for example. So we use Teams in, inter-officely. but also sometimes a quick phone call can also just alleviate a huge situation. So understanding, who your audience is and how they want to be communicated with, I would say that's probably the biggest thing I could recommend.
Okay, cool. And then as far as hiring goes, Dave, because I think this is a good topic to go down a little bit. I feel like, especially for scratch agencies, like Steven said, hiring their first or second or third person. When it comes to hiring, like, what is some of the biggest things you look out for when you're bringing on a new candidate?
Sure. Well, first thing is I always like to do an interview first, and the interview is really kind of gauge the person more from like an attitude and demeanor perspective, because like there's certain things you can teach. Like you can teach insurance, you can teach content, but you can't teach an attitude. I can't teach a work ethic. So I want to first see if they have that. If they do, then a lot of times what we'll do is called a caliper exam, which is kind of like a behavioral profile. It kind of tells me more about how to manage and what are they looking for. As I mentioned earlier, are they a self-starter or are they someone who needs that structure? So that kind of helps us kind of see, and also it tells you kind of, are they in the right role? So for example, someone may say, I want to be a salesperson, and then you see the caliber, and then you find out they're terrible with rejection. Not a good quality in a salesperson. But you may say, listen, you might be better off in a different role. So that kind of gives me kind of almost a peek behind the curtain on kind of what makes somebody tick. I'll do that. I'll also do something called VMB hits, which it's basically an insurance exam. It kind of tells me, it allows me to gauge their insurance knowledge. So if I'm hiring a commercial lines person, it kind of gives them a brief overview on a lot of different topics, and then the results may come in as, very strong on BOPs, very weak on workers' comp, or stuff like that. So it kind of tells me areas where they may need some bolstering. If I'm hiring a construction specialist and I find out they're terrible in construction, it's not a great fit. But if I'm hiring a BOP specialist and they're terrible in construction, that's okay to me, because where they're going to roll is going to be more in their wheelhouse. And listen, the insurance industry is a very, very wide industry. It's impossible to know everything about every industry out there. So that's why it's very good to kind of almost get people who are smart people. It's funny. We always joke, this is Steve Jobs quote, that we hire smart people to tell us what to do, not to tell them what to do. So, we do take that very seriously. And also calling references. I mean, you get the resume for a reason. If you know somebody on there, give them a buzz and say, hey, like, how was it? Get their feedback. So that's and as I mentioned earlier, also is if you can. I understand obviously cash flow is always a concern, but if you can hire before it's an emergency, it kind of gives you that luxury of time and really vetting the right person. If you're already behind the 8 ball and you just got to hire somebody because they're a person who's upright, it's kind of makes almost kind of puts your back behind against the wall, so to speak. So always a good thing. If you can, I understand cash flow, especially if you are a cash agency, a scratch agency. Sometimes that's not a luxury you may have, but if you had that luxury, it's always a nice thing to do.
Well, this topic around this statement that I'm going to say is becoming repetitive for some of the listeners, maybe rolling their eyes because we talked about the last 4 or 5 episodes. But getting the right people on the bus and then finding their seat, I think it's so important. I don't think you can talk about it enough. And we had Billy Wagner on last week, and we talked about that, about finding the right person in whatever role it is, and then finding where do they work best for the organization. Even when you are scratch, I want a rock star person that I can teach insurance to, that just gets the vision of what we're trying to do, rather than someone who's had insurance knowledge and is miserable, and because that's just going to bring you down no matter what phase of the game you're at.
And I think you have to have, like, and this, we've talked about this too, is like over communication, right? So I was just telling Steven prior to this call, like, I have an employee that I just trained a new task on, and I thought they would be a good fit for it. They helped me with a lot of admin support and back-end support stuff. And I thought, well, it's time, like, how it gets, Dave, like my inbox is out of control because I'm just getting to the point where I'm starting to delegate more and more. Right. So I said, I'll bring this lady on to help me delegate and, delegate some of the emails and stuff. And truthfully, I just put way too much on her plate. But I caught it fairly quick. Like after a couple of weeks, I was like, I just have to communicate with her. Does she like this? Does she want to continue to even do this task? Like I can sense a little, I don't want to say frustration, but I can tell. She was slightly frustrated. So I just had several calls with her and just said, like today, I said, hey, do you still want to do this task? It's completely okay if you don't want to do it. I know you have a lot on your plate. You're doing a whole bunch of other tasks. I can delegate this to somebody else to take care of if it's not something you enjoy doing or you don't think you're efficient at it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And we had the conversation and she straight up said, yeah. She's like, yeah, you could take that off my plate. Like I could tell it was like a little sigh of relief, you know?
Sure.
So
Sure.
I feel like you guys said it, like over communicating with your employees is so important, because I feel like honestly, if I didn't have that conversation, my emails would have got messed up over time. She would have became really unhappy and maybe even left. And it would have caused some sort of animosity. So Dave, how do you guys are a hybrid style, right? At your office?
Correct. We are. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So how do you guys communicate? Like, do you have like weekly team meetings? Like, how do you guys stay in touch?
So it's funny. So obviously, I mentioned earlier we do Teams. So obviously, you know, the windows or doors are always open to talk. Yeah. So if you have an issue, there's no hesitation there. Excuse me. More than that. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No, it's fine.
On top of that, so we have weekly meetings on the underwriting team, and then we have twice a month I meet with the entire commercial staff, once in person, once virtually. And then we're actually starting to do more sub meetings based on niches of business. So, for example, we're doing like a construction meeting once a month, as well as a habitational or real estate meeting once a month, because there's no need to have the entire staff who may not have a construction account be involved in the construction. So, so the twice a month commercial lines meetings are more high level stuff for everybody, and then from there they kind of dive into their particular branches, so to speak. So try to really do, to kind of get the right information out to the right people and not really waste or clutter people's time with things that may or may not really impact their desk in particular. And like listen, I'm a big fan of not having meetings just for the sake of having a meeting. Why do that? So it's important to me that time is very efficient and making sure that we're making the most of it. But and like listen, I've always had an open door policy. So as much as I have those meetings set, it does not mean that people cannot talk to me. I mean, I see the commercial line service manager sees on Zoom calls or team calls rather almost all day, just constantly talking to people, guiding people, and investing in people. So that's always something that we're that not only on my level but even the managers are talking to other people on their own as well.
Yeah, Dave, have you found that? It's so funny because pre-kids, I would tell you that I'm fine with remote. Oh, being remote's cool. Yeah, it's fine. Now that I have 2 kids, I'm like, being in the office is kind of nice, It just gives you, it kind of just gives you your own space to be. I feel like now I see more of the side of why being in person is, why you can be more efficient and productive being in person. And that's my point of view. But I'd love, you've dealt with way more employees than I have. So I'd love your feedback on that. Have you found that people are more efficient being in the office? Like what's your take on that?
So I will say people are people. So it's hard to say everyone's more efficient at home or hybrid or whatever. So it's funny. I'm very much a believer. It's funny when COVID hit and we all scattered. Some people loved being remote. And I kind of told people, like, listen, like if clients are being taken care of, phone calls are being returned, policies are being renewed, then I'm not going to really force the issue. But if I see that clients are not getting phone calls back and policies not being renewed or they're falling through the cracks, I'm going to have to kind of bring people back in. So don't make me be that guy. And everybody stepped up for the most part. And there are people who enjoy coming in 5 days a week. And I have people here 5 days a week on their own accord, which is totally fine. I think the hybrid model works very well because it allows people to kind of plug in here, have that camaraderie, have that collaboration. So it's cool they get to have that. But then they kind of get to kind of unplug and kind of really focus in on more maybe projects that having people kind of chatter in the background might kind of present a distraction. So they kind of get the best of both worlds. And like, listen, I have people in Florida who obviously they're full-time remote because obviously it's a hell of a commute from Florida. So they're obviously fully remote. And honestly, I mean, with the system that we have, I mean, listen, I could run reports and see what people are doing constantly. if I really wanted to. Honestly, I also try to have a level of trust of, listen, like, we're all adults here. If I have to babysit you, maybe you're not a good fit for the agency anyway. So that's kind of my take of, like, if I have to like run reports to see what you're doing all the time, maybe that's not maybe we're not a fit.
Can you dive a little? Can you dive a little deeper into this about the process of how you set the expectations? Because this entire time you've been explaining this, that's basically what you've been saying is, hey, these are the expectations. If you want to work remote and you want to have that hybrid flexibility and you need to do, whatever, but these are the expectations that need to be done. And the reason I cut you off there was you were saying, I'm not going to measure this, right? But you're obviously having the conversation of these are the things that have to be done. What is that with your staff? What do those conversations look like?
So what that means is, so obviously I look at expiration lists and stuff like that. So I want to make sure that, the accounts that are coming up for renewal are in fact being renewed, that clients are being serviced. So again, we're I will say a mid-sized boutique family insurance agency. So that boutique part right there kind of, I feel like, delineates us from a lot of other agencies where we try to have good relations with clients. So we always say the warm and fuzzy. So for example, we want to give clients the warm and fuzzy. If clients, and listen, I find clients tend not to be very bashful about, if they're not getting the service they want, they tend to call me. So, and a lot of clients that I've known for many, many years, so I do check in with them organically throughout just the year of, hey, how's it going? How's so-and-so treating you? How's it working with this person? And, a lot of times they give me great feedback of, like, listen, like, they're great. They're always around when I need them. And listen, there have been times in the past where they're like, I don't know, does she work for you anymore? I don't hear from her ever. Like, I email her, it goes into some abyss. And usually those are people who tend not to work out long-term here. So that's kind of the way it goes. So that's kind of one, I guess we'll say, metrics, so to speak. Like I said, it's clients being called back, policies renewing. And again, like I can always like kind of talk to somebody. Another metric, and this is more of an informal metric, is if I call somebody, I've kind of made it very clear. If I call you and you're on the other line, Teams me saying, hey, I'm on the line. I'll buzz you back. Excuse me. But if I call you constantly and I hear nothing and I don't get a response from Teams or nothing, then part of me is like concerned of, what are you doing? Like, where are you? Like, listen, I understand. Like, I'm not going to be this like ostrich and put his head in the ground and say, like, listen, you're a home remote. You don't do a load of laundry. Right. I get that. I'm not going to be this micromanager. But if I need you and like you're not around and I can't get you like for 30, 40 minutes, an hour, whatever, you're not at your desk, I'm gonna have some questions about that. And actually, another thing I will say, and this has been a very positive side effect, is while people are remote, I'm finding, excuse me, sorry about that, the phone's ringing. I'm also finding that people tend to also log in a little earlier because they lost their commute time. So our hours typically are 8:30 to 4:30. I find people tend to kind of log in maybe around 7:45, 8 o'clock, and they may stay on until maybe 5 o'clock, 5:15, because they would have been traveling. So essentially, as far as they're concerned, they still gain time in their day.
Yeah.
Whereas, so I get a little extra on the front end or the back end, but they also get some extra time on the front and back end as well. So it kind of helps everybody else.
What do you do about time off with the hybrid different thing?
So it's funny. So actually, we try to have like backups here. So everyone kind of has like maybe 3 or 4 buddies, so to speak. So if someone's going to be out, basically they kind of let their partners know that they're out. We also try to advise clients well in advance, essentially, of like a month in advance. Like, for example, I went away a few weeks ago. Like a month prior to that, I put in my signature, I will not be available from this date to this date. If you need somebody, call so and so.
Sure.
So we try to make it we try to be very upfront and transparent that this person's going to be out. And listen, if someone's going to be out for a day or so, we don't typically do it there. It's usually if you're going to be gone for 5 days or longer, so to speak.
Yeah.
So we try to make it very clear to the clients, and also make it clear to the team. And obviously, before when the person goes out on vacation, we typically sit down, that the afternoon prior to them leaving, and say, hey, what's on your desk? What are you expecting? Do you anticipate any issues? And then we're all kind of briefed on it. So if it does blow up, they're aware of it.
Sure.
So we do it that way pretty much.
Yeah. No, the reason I asked that is because we see a lot of people in the circle Sean and I are on and talking about, the unlimited time off buzz. And then there's a lot of there's a lot of things around now, this 4-day work week that people are talking about. And we know a guy who has an agency that's trying to test that model, but similar to your hybrid remote schedule, as long as the things are getting done, like you said, I don't care if you're putting a load of laundry in, as long as you're responding to me and actively, they're available. And I think with those things that I just mentioned, it's interesting with people that we know that are testing those. It's the same type of.
Yeah, I'd be very curious to see how it works out, because ultimately, at the end of the day, we are a service industry. So if you have a 4-day work week, and I have a contractor looking to get in on a project and they need a certificate, and you're out Friday, contractors be kind of pissed, to be honest. So that's why as much as like I give wiggle room, again, if clients are being taken care of and they can get on the job sites and the certificates are being taken care of. I mean, ultimately, certificates and claims are, in my opinion, are probably the two biggest things why clients want us, essentially.
Yeah.
So if we take care of those things, then usually we're okay. But I mean, if the client's trying to get on a job and we can't get that certificate and they lose that job, I mean, they're not happy about that at all.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, listen, if he figured it out, I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, I think we're going to have him on if he does figure it out, because he's doing some interesting things. I know I'm completely side railing. I'm getting that look from Sean, but he's doing some interesting things of with his staff. Everybody's in on Monday, and the rest of the days is one other flex. So someone's always there. Someone's always there to do the certificate. Someone's always there to answer the phone. It's not just the agency shut down on Thursday because this is our 4th day off or anything. But it's interesting from a morale and a culture and a standpoint of how he's trying to pull that off. So
interesting. No, that's interesting. Cool.
Yep. Well, Dave, let's end off with the last question we wanted to ask you. And I guess we'll spin it slightly different. If you were to start a scratch agency tomorrow, so let's say whatever happens to Borg and Borg, you
say, man, Steven and Sean are having so much fun starting this from scratch. I want to try it.
Yeah, you sell it to me and Steven, no big deal. And then you go and then you go and start scratch tomorrow with your cousin and brother. What would you do differently?
So one thing I've done is as much as I know, well, I think I understand. Is a lot of times there's this pressure to rush. Like I gotta grow. And the problem is in my experience, when people tend to rush, they tend to make bigger mistakes or simple mistakes that could have been avoided. And I've noticed in my career, like sometimes, we had an acquisition. If we rush it, it tends to not go as smoothly when we take our time. If we bring on an employee and we rush it, they tend to not learn as much. When we transitioned management systems, we didn't think we rushed it, but we found out we kind of did rush it, and there were a lot of things that kind of didn't work out as smoothly as they could have done had we really taken our time, really digested the process. So that's probably something I would do, is not necessarily just jump. It's kind of really digest and analyze the situation. Obviously, you want to avoid paralysis by analysis, but you also don't want to just ready, fire, aim, and then crap, what did I just do? So it's a nice balance, but I find a lot of people tend to just do because they think they have to, rather than think and then move forward.
Yeah.
So that's probably something I would probably.
It's so good. I mean, you're speaking to me in a sense of I'm bringing on my first client-facing person in the next week here, and I've kind of had to have those conversations in my own head of, okay, Steven, you're going to have to take a little step back here to take a big leap forward. And it's just like the sales are probably going to go down a little bit. The prospecting is going to go down, but I need to be pouring into that new person and onboarding them in the correct manner so that they have success
100%.
Instead of, I'm sorry, I got to get this quote out, but I'll get to you in a minute. And they're sitting in the corner and they're not happy and they're going to leave it. But I very much appreciate you saying that selfishly, because I need to hear that right now. But also there's a lot of people listening that I think are in that standpoint of when that next person comes, making sure that foundation is built, making sure you understand that it's a time commitment and that can apply for acquisitions, all the things that you just talked about. So that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's just at the end of the day, it's having the patience, right? And I feel like that is the hard. I feel like if you're entrepreneurial spirited, like most of us are listening or on this call, I would say we tend to naturally want to rush things because we have a vision. We want to achieve big things. So it's like, let's just go. So I think that's great advice of just take a breath,
plan it,
make sure it gets done right. Take your time,
Yeah, and Stephen, I think you said it perfectly when you said take one step backward to go 3 steps forward. And it's funny, we've used that expression multiple times because a lot of times you have to do that. You have to almost kind of say, like, I can't do that right now because I have to pour into this person. But then 12 months or 12 months, or it could be 6 months, whatever it is, all of a sudden that person's now fully operational and you can do a lot more now. So, I think that's a great expression.
Yeah.
At least that's the plan. At least that's what I'm telling myself.
Yeah.
Dave,
put that on your wall somewhere just to remind you that, just slow down, take a breath.
I'm just going to replay the last 4 minutes of this podcast over and over for the next couple of months. Dave, thanks so much for joining us. It was great to meet you. Like I said, I've heard a lot about you from Sean, and we really appreciate you taking the time to join us. For anybody that is listening and wanted to reach out to you, maybe there was something you said they just want to pick your brain on or just follow your journey, where's a good place to connect with you?
Yeah, so I can give you my email address if that works. I can just dhborg@borgins.com. Website is www.borgins.com. I know that's a super old-fashioned thing to do nowadays with a website.
No, .com is still good.
Okay, all right. I'm finding that I'm becoming more and more older than I realize, so I use really weird expressions. So I would say email. My phone number, is 631-673-7600, extension 530. That's for David H. My father's David. Obviously, if you ask for him, you may or may not get him, depending on where he is. But I'm still here.
Unless you're talking to an underwriter.
Sorry?
I said, unless you're talking to an underwriter, just say David Borg.
Exactly. But again, thank you for having me on. It's been a privilege and an honor to kind of share my experiences it's Sean, you mentioned that you enjoy hanging out with me, and to be honest, there's been so many people that I've looked up to that have poured into me, and I feel like I'm actually happy I'm able to do the same for you and your viewers. So I appreciate that opportunity. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Dave.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. That's another episode of the Scratch Agency Podcast. Thanks for joining us. Do us a favor, like the show, share the show, and subscribe. Most importantly, remember to dig down deep, believe in yourself, and own your own future. We'll see you next week. Take care.